New Jersey. I have to look up.
We're going for it. We're just dropping right into it. Keep going. Act like the internet lady's not there.
And so, he just said, oh, wow, we haven't done anything in person in a while. Let me reach out to some people and I'll keep you posted. We used to meet in Chestnut Hill. That's a neighborhood in Philadelphia. And I said, oh, that's really close to where I live. Let's just stay in touch.
Word. Yep. Oh, and it's funny that this should come up at this particular time because I've been thinking for a good long while, long and hard, about like the ideal way to both learn and teach liberating structures. I am very opinionated in that context, and I actually just landed on a masterclass that we're going to start here on November 15th that we might have a seat or two left on. Although I'm already over the intended limit. We wanted to do a cohort of 12 and we're already at 10. So, but yeah, for sure. I mean, liberating structures are awesome and relatively easy to learn. The tricky part is just figuring out how and when to apply the things. I mean, I'm sure you've looked at the website and probably gandered at the book and whatnot and realized that for the purpose of learning, those resources are almost completely useless. Not that I don't appreciate them, but they don't stick the landing on when do I use this tool. Like maybe what's it good for, but that sorting portion is tricky. But no, for sure, Colleen, you're in the right place.
So Jeremy, you recommend I get the book. I'm not even there yet with the book.
No, I literally just a couple weeks ago gave my copy away because I've had it now for 4 years and I've never read it. So
oh well, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement for me to run right out and get it.
No,
I would suggest, Colleen, that you download the apps. There's apps that have most of the information that's in the book. So the book. I'm with you, Jeremy. I did look through the book, but I find it's marginal at best, and the real information is what's included in the app, which is easier to navigate and absorb, as far as I'm concerned. Do you agree?
I mean, so the app is going to give you like the most essential procedural information, right? So liberating structures, maybe I can send this image. Liberating structures consist of 5 design elements. So if you just think about each structure as, pardon me, as an instruction set, right? So each liberating structure just consists of instructions for 5 different dimensions. One of those is how participation is distributed, with a basic understanding that participation should be distributed across the entire group, an assumption in that respect. They include instructions of how groups are formed, with an assumption that you should form smaller subgroups. There includes instructions that that are sort of algorithmic in nature, a set of steps over time, right? So you can sort of see how participation is distributed in small groups, steps over time, sort of offer these like mechanical type of dance moves. And then you have structures that most represent that. Like I'm sure you've probably seen 1, 2, 4 all at some point. That's very exemplary of these 3 different instruction sets. And you can sort of get a feel for, you can put anything inside of that instruction set, like any subject matter, any direction to guide a conversation or inquiry will work fine in those mechanics. And then there's, in addition to those 3 design elements, there is invitation. So that is the particular question or prompt that directs a conversation. And there are different structures that most exemplify that idea of invitation, like that sort of that take the conversation and move it in a very particular direction. Triz, for example, is a very good example of a very invitationally type of structure. What, so what, now what is also what I would consider an invitational structure. They just say, all right, use these that 1, 2, 4 all in this particular direction. What, so what, now what, data, inference, action, Triz, what's the opposite of a good direction? They sort of, you get this feeling of like, oh, that's moving us this way, this is moving us that way. And there's a subset of structures that move us in different directions in terms of our inquiry. And then last but not least, the 5th instruction set that is included in all liberating structures, but is most exemplified in some, are how materials and resources and space are utilized. And so those structures revolve around some form of artifact, really. So an example of those type of structures that most exemplify this instruction for artifact would be like eco-cycle planning. Have you seen that one? Maybe you've seen open space technology. If not, I'll just rattle a couple more off. The agreement certainty matrix, critical uncertainties. These all sort of revolve around a visual sense-making artifact that a larger group of people can then use to orient their thinking all in one sort of direction. Open space technology being this sort of like Excel spreadsheet that we would create on a big ass wall with places and time, and then we would just allocate the topics and subjects that we wanted to talk about in those different blocks of space in those different places. The eco-cycle planning is this metaphor for the eco-cycle, the process of sort of gestation or seed or regeneration, and how things sort of move into a birth phase after they've gestated for a little bit, where some time and energy has gone into these things, but they're not, and they're sort of sprouting, but they're not quite viable. And then things tend to go towards maturity, this state where they're like a fully grown tree, like produces fruit every year without much you paying attention to it much, right? Maturity produces a lot of value. And then creative destruction being this stage where, if a tree gets a blight and, is producing less fruit, you can always chop it down, make space for a new tree, and like burn the wood and releasing that energy for some other productive goal. But that's just one. These are just a couple examples of structures that are mostly based around these artifacts that help orient thinking and stuff like that. What's up? Will I reshare the file? Do you mean the design storyboard file, Sherry? Yeah, I can track that down. And it's probably while I've been seduced into ramble mode, and it happens. Why don't I invite everybody into some breakout sessions? We can start off with impromptu networking so that everybody can get to know one another a little bit and listen to each other talk rather than me. Let's see. Move you over yonder. Oh no. About that. Excellent. So let me just open some rooms up for 5 minutes to give you folks a chance to get to know one another. And by the time you come back, Sherry, I'll have that link for you. Do you have another question? Before I just start bossing folks about.
Are we in a breakout room? Oh no.
Yeah, I'm pushing you that direction. Talk about something. How did you get to know liberating structures? Oh, let me pause this motherfucker.
Yeah, and so the meetings could really use liberating structures, right?
That's exactly where I'm like, wow, there's another opportunity for me to, because there's so much of that, not a full distributed participation, what Jeremy was just saying. So nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
Word. So this is one of those things. Usually in impromptu networking, I would offer you an invitation, a particular question or a particular prompt that would orient your attention towards something. But I mean, as you can see, even when you totally fuck it up, it works out. It's fine. Humans are great. Let's do that again with some new folks.
Jeremy, you're having a solar eclipse. Just wanted to let you know.
I'm having a solar eclipse.
Yeah, it's very dark where you are now.
Oh. Maybe that'll have fixed it. We'll find out. Perhaps. We just jump into this thing. So that was a crash of impromptu networking. It still worked out pretty well. And we are here in the context that is the Wise Crowds Liberating Structures design call. And what we're going to do is the same thing that we do at this time. Wanted to know what you use LS for. Let's see. I hope, can you guys see the link to the doc that I put in there? Let me just put it in again. What do we use liberating structures for? That's a really good question. Well, let's maybe start with a very concrete example. Does anybody have a design brief that we might be able to work on today? Some form of help request or a specific instance of a meeting or a training workshopy type thing that we might be able to look at and figure out a string of structures for.
I do.
John's got one.
I do.
Cool. Awesome. So let me just go through the structure. So we're going to use the structure that is Wise Crowds to explore this this design brief or help request of John. And the way that's going to work is John's first going to just take 2 minutes to give us the high level overview of whatever the content of his help request is. And then we're going to take 3 minutes, the rest of us as a group, and ask him clarifying questions. So clarifying questions are clarifying questions. They are not advice sort of cloaked in clarifying questions, but they're just trying to get more information and more surface area so we can sort of grok what he's talking about. And then after that 3 minutes, John will sort of recuse himself from the conversation. He'll turn off his webcam in this instance and mute himself. And then we, the rest of the group, are going to have a conversation about his help request and come up with some form of advice. In this context, our advice is mostly focused on what do we think of that? What do we recognize? And driving towards what structures, liberating structures in particular, could we use to help him out and then string together for him to address his situation. After 8 minutes of that, John will come back and give us his 2 cents on what he has heard of that conversation. So he'll importantly be listening while we discuss his situation and taking notes, but not participating, of course. And so he'll come back in and tell us, this is what I thought was interesting. This portion I can really use, thanks so much, or that was crazy, you guys were off your rocker, moving in a completely different direction, which in and of itself helped me better understand that that's not my question, this thing over here is my question, or something along those lines. So that's the basic pattern of wise crowds. Are there any questions about the blueprint or the mechanics of that structure? All right, then let her rip.
Okay, so as I've mentioned, and some of you may know, I am a college instructor. I teach a course in computer science. It's a project-based course at RPI. And throughout the semester, groups of 4 or 5 developers, students, work together to create a software project. I want to use tonight's class. The class starts. It's an hour and 50 minutes, 50. So I'm looking for something that will fill about an hour and a half. So it can't really. It really can't be more than 90 minutes. I could push it a little bit, but what I want to do is groups run into problems in general, being groups. Especially if you're college students. It's like, that guy's a jerk, so I don't want to do what I don't have to keep my promise. Groups run into problems with, basically not working together as a team, where they, one person will go, oh, screw you guys, I'm just going to do all the coding because I know what I'm doing and get it done and work in a silo. Other students, don't do that, and they go, screw it, Fred will do it. That kind of thing. Then there's also, what else? I'm looking over here at some lists my TAs put together. Groups have a problem of looking at the instructions and delivering what they're supposed to deliver based on what the specifications that I provide are. They have to do a lot of documentation and writing stuff periodically, and so they'll deliver the material, but it's not complete, or they didn't really follow the instructions and delivered something that they thought rather than based on what I said or slides or that kind of thing. There's also the problem of students going, I missed a meeting, and not tell anybody. They just don't show up. I've had someone, I'm studying for an exam, I have to write a paper, I forgot, there's always something, but they tell it after the fact. So anyway, those are the kind of problems that they run into. And here we are, we're 2/3 the way through the semester, and this is where the symptoms really do pile up. And so what I want to do tonight is use liberating structures to reinvigorate and re-inspire the groups to be more productive and efficient in completing their work. Next week, they have to deliver their first delivery of their software. And so I want that to be successful. And so this week they can regroup and put themselves together. I think that's all I need to tell you.
Clarifying questions.
Yeah.
How many, is it 4 or 5 students per group?
Yes, that's right. Most teams have 5, some teams have 4. And there's usually 50 people in a class.
Do they choose the groups or are they assigned?
They choose the groups.
And what's the duration for the group? How long do they stay together?
The full semester.
How many deliverables?
Oh, 4 or 5, periodically. And its deliverables are, write a set of documents, create a demo of this or that, create a video. It's that kind of thing. And they come in these clumps, and the next clump is due on this coming Friday.
All right, so let me just go back through the design brief and check my understanding. We'll do good old fashioned checksum. That's a nerdy idea, right? So the context is in the frame of this college course, and groups run into problems around communication, misinterpretation of the instructions, like excuses and good old-fashioned stuff. And what you hope to get out of this session is to re-inspire the students and their collaboration on these projects. The participants of this design brief are you as the teacher, as well as the students, split into these groups of 5. We've got 90 minutes, and will this be in an online context?
No, I actually, my class has been a bit hybrid, but I actually made the request that everybody show up tonight in person.
Okay, so this will be predominantly in person.
Now, Sherry's asking some questions. Can I address those?
Awesome. Yeah, for sure.
So Sherry's asking, is the grade dependent on working together or performance? There is part of their grade is that, but it's a peer grade. And so I believe it's 15% depends on how well you've performed in your group. But that's feedback that they don't get until the end of the semester. The next thing she asks is, are there many students who are misbehaving or just a handful? And I wouldn't say it's misbehaving. I mean, these are smart, responsible kids in general. The issue is that, you know, they get a little complacent. I want to say lazy, but that's not appropriate. It really is complacent, and someone else will do it. I don't have to. I had all this energy at the beginning, but you know, I've got other stuff to do. Yeah, and then the last thing she wrote, you know, clarifying it, Jeremy, it's 1 hour, 50 minutes. That's how long the class is. But, you know, there's a few other things I need to do when people need to settle. So I want to keep it within 90 minutes. Is there any other questions from you, Sherry? Did that answer it? You have more, Jeremy?
Nope.
I have
That's
one. I have one. You said that you have groups of 4 to 5 people. How many groups do you have?
There's I teach 2 classes back to back. And so in those 2 classes, it's 20. So
Okay,
9 in one section, 11 in another.
So what you've noticed and what you've shared with us, do you find it in every single group?
No. No,
Okay.
no, there are some groups that are exemplary, and you know, there's 5 people and they're all rowing really hard and getting it done, but that's not necessarily the rule.
Okay. Okay. What would you say the teams that work well? What's the percentage? What's their?
I would say 5 to 10%. Most groups have some issue. My goal is to motivate them and inspire them. I can't make them do anything, and you know, if they muddle through, that's fine, but I want to really increase the quality.
Is computing important to them? Is it like a major class, or is it a class? Is it an elective, or what is it?
No. These people live and breathe computer code from when they were little kids. Dyed-in-the-wool programmers.
Oh dear. Now I see where the problem is coming in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. Well, that gives us a good surface area, John. So if you want to mute yourself and turn off the webcam, we will chop it up.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
So what do we recognize? What structures come to mind? And how might we string those together? So in particular, I noticed this this like trope, or for lack of a better word, like the stereotype. People who like to code don't like to talk to other people, and problems ensue. So there's a thing that is super recognizable in that space. Anybody else?
Well, I have the opposite experience of engineers working really well together. And I'm trying to figure out what can we sort of put together that would change this ethos or whatever it is.
Sure says, I observe the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse come to play. Okay. Death, war, famine, pestilence. What can we put together to change the ethos for sure? Colleen, what's that?
So, I mean, I don't know the structures yet. What I'm curious about is for the whole semester, like I'm wondering if there's assigned roles that can be in the team and then it rotates, because one of the problems is you get stuck in a role and then you don't get to flex and do something else.
Well, the first structure that comes to my mind is what do I need from you? I think that if you want to improve communication, it's good to appear as somebody who is in need and who could benefit from help. So so that would be one structure that I could recommend.
Sweet. John Gottman's 4 horses of the horsemen of the apocalypse. What we got a link. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Ooh.
Another structure that comes to mind, because it's funny that I can see with those horsemen of the apocalypse is going to this sort of the evil dark side of things, which have been described. But I think that we should go for another one, and I think that appreciative inquiry can be interesting as well. I mean, for you, Colleen, I don't know. Do you know appreciative inquiry? The gist of it?
Very, very. I've heard of it. I don't know that much about it.
Well, basically, it's to help. It's narration, it's stories, and basically, it's stories where everything went really well, that you can tell other people. So you have somebody who's asking the questions, and then and then again, it involves also an interesting way of listening to things. And I think that if these guys can how do you say, can practice this, listening and things that are joyous and where they all can actually share this, that can maybe change the karma.
I like that. I'm also wondering, because this goes on for a whole semester, it seems like there would be nice if there was a mechanism to reset if there's some missteps early on, either a miscommunication or assumptions that are going in that negative direction. If there's ways to kind of reset, so it's not like at the end of the semester, all of a sudden you get a pure grade. It's like, not that it would be a surprise, but.
Some form of incremental feedback along the way of how are we doing? Are we on track or not? Would be helpful to get feedback on an ongoing basis rather than just in the end. So I like the interesting suggestion around what I need from you. That also sort of brings up this topic that I think that you brought in, Colleen, around roles, right? And just some level of clarity or fidelity about what are the roles that we have been occupying, to just create the reflection around that. And then I really love the idea of an intentional rotation of that all right, so now we're going to mix it up. Whether that has been a truly functional arrangement or it has been dysfunctional, just to engage in the sort of serious play of get outside of your normal habituation and try to inhabit a different way of interacting in this group context. Could be a really fun invitation. A couple particular patterns that come to mind to reflect upon this stuff. Thinking again about the time constraints that we're under. Triz feels like super essential, right? You know, how is it that we turn this project into the worst possible shit show imaginable, right? How do we, you know, how would we operate if it was our goal to fail? Like every one of us, you know, failing grade. What would we do? And then to look at that laundry list of we would do these things and go, well, you know, are we doing any of them both? You know, even how about a little bit? You know, how about in small insidious ways? Are we behaving in these antisocial ways that are going to lead us to bad outcomes? Could be a nice moment of self-reflection. Another pattern that pops up that I really appreciated about your question, Philip, is discovery action dialogue. So that could look at inviting the groups to remix, to reconstellate, and discovery action dialogue leads an inquiry around 7 basic questions. And this could be a good feed from Triz, but asking folks in particular, hey, let me grab the thing. Ta-da, it's the 7 questions. How do I know when X problem is present? So, you know, if we did Triz and we came up with a laundry list of relevant challenges, you could divide those challenges into groups, remix the groups, blah, 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 and go and have each group focus on a particular challenge. Or you could have everybody parallel process one highly relevant challenge in different constellations. And the series of 7 questions is not, it is listed in a list of 7 questions, but you can handle or treat the questions in any particular order. It's designed to sort of fish and search for what we call positive deviance, right? Well, let me go through the questions and you'll get the gist of it. How do I know when X problem is present? How do I contribute to effectively solving that problem? What prevents me from doing this or taking actions all of the time? And do you know anybody who is able to frequently solve that problem and overcome those barriers? What behaviors or practices make their success possible? And then, you know, do we have any ideas? What needs to be done to make that happen? Any volunteers? Who else needs to be involved? You know, much more like action-y oriented stuff. So especially that question number 4, do we know, is there a group? Is there somebody within the group that's able to overcome this challenge on a regular basis? What do they do? How do I get a piece of that in my group? You know, to hip check the vibe, so to speak. So that's another possibility. Anybody else?
Did we think it was significant that they self-choose the groups? Is there anything around that?
Yeah, for sure. There's a interesting question about the like the dynamics and roles, like how I am in a group, that becomes a particularly interesting like line of inquiry. Right, that might be a little bit more than these guys were, than this situation, than this particular condition could be conducive towards. But if you wanted to like turn the reflective mirror like directly on like how do I contribute to the vibe and in this context and what drew me into that, that could be fruitful. When I think about this, the structures that could help us address this type of stuff, for whatever reason, Wicked Questions comes to mind. So Wicked Questions is a pattern. Again, it's one of these invitational types of structures. So it sort of directs the conversation in a particular direction. And that direction is looking for the paradoxical yet complementary forces that need to be balanced in order to be successful. So it's less about answering the wicked question, but just even framing it up and generating the wicked question. So that you can do in a number of different ways. You can literally just give folks the template and say, come up with wicked questions. And that template is, how is it that we were both alpha and omega at the same time, right? Find me the paradoxical yet complementary forces that feel very polarized and challenging to balance. So that's like this most classical way. You could do that with 1, 2, 4 all on both sides of the wicked questions. You know, come up with a set of wicked questions in 1, 2, 4 all, and then like cross-pollinate and condense. Another way that you can generate wicked questions is you can brainstorm just in a 1, 2, 4 all. What are the qualities, aspects, and traits of great group collaboration? Just come up with a list of all of the things that you think you need to be successful, and then look through that list to see if there's any things that go, ooh, actually, how are we going to get both of these things at the same time? We've identified we want this and we want this, but here in this particular coupling, we notice that something that doesn't, they sort of repel one another. There's also a template that I'm aware of that starts from a positive trait. So let's see if I can find it. It's here in Yonder album. Wicked question. So it starts at a positive trait. So come up with a core quality that is good, that we want, that we broadly agree that we want. And then if we think about what's too much of that good thing, so maybe this will help. Is there any particular example of like a positive quality that we want in team collaboration?
Clear communication.
Perfect. Clear communication. And if we think about too much clear communication, what might be the pitfall or too much of that good thing? That could be
Inefficiencies.
There we go. Inefficiencies, jawing about shit and not doing anything. And if we think about the positive opposite of that inefficiency, like that might be
Jumping to conclusions.
there we go.
Going too quickly to a conclusion.
Yeah, jumping to conclusion sounds great. And then if we think about too much of the challenges, we want a positive frame. So jumping to conclusions, the positive frame for that might be like hyper agency, like lots of agency, like lots of action orientation. All right. And then if we think about too much action orientation might lead us to what might be our allergy there.
What is this structure that you're sort of going through, Jeremy?
It's a pattern that I learned from Justin Novetsky. He's a practitioner in Seattle region. I'll send the image here in the chat. So burnout, yeah, there we go. So that might lead us to too much of that action orientation might cause us to burn out or to chaos or something along those lines. So if we think about these 4 steps that we've taken, we've kind of come full circle, and we start off with clear communication on one side, and on the flip side of our polarity, we have action, like hyper action, right? So how is it that we have both clear communication and agency? Let's use that one. So how is it that we have both clear communication and agency at the same time? And while this might be not be a perfect example, we can sort of see that like there's something about clear communication and agency that like repel each other. Like my agency doesn't want to communicate clearly, obviously, and my clear communication kind of has a, an allergy towards like this dude over here who just wants to run and gun all the time. Right? So that's another way that we can formulate these wicked questions. So so we've got a laundry list of different patterns that we might be able to use. We've got some wicked questions up in the mix. We have TRIZ, we have appreciative interviews, we have discovery action dialogue. Given this context and this case of students, I'm 50-50 as far as which way would be more fun or entertaining. It might be good to try both since he's got two groups, but I think especially around the string that is either appreciative interviews, tell a story about kick-ass collaboration and look for the principles that overlap in those stories, and think about how we can do more of those things together. TRIZ and discovery action dialogue. It seems to be TRIZ and discovery action dialogue have a little bit more oomph to it. They string together well because we're generating problems and then we're looking for solutions, like emergent solutions that are already in the constellation of these groups. That feels really sticky and good. And if I think about appreciative interviews and this other structure of wicked questions, that could be really fertile ground, because appreciative interviews is going to tell a story about great collaboration and tell your story about great collaboration. Between those stories, we're going to figure out some principles of common good collaboration. And then we might be able to look for those principles of common good collaboration and come up with a wicked question. Right? Look if there's any of those principles that have that type of polarity. And if we do, the flip side, and this might be a little bit too much time for John's context, but I think it should work, would be integrated autonomy. And integrated autonomy works like the Venn diagram. So we generate the wicked question. So let's just say clear communication and agency is our wicked question. We would brainstorm strategies to generate clear communication. And then we brainstorm strategies to generate agency. And then we would just look at those two lists and see, are there anything in the in between of those lists that might help us tick both boxes that we can then activate that help us answer the wicked question. So those might be two particular strings that we could activate. Sherry, what's up? Is there a project leader owner during the round of the project? Ooh. What about them repel each other? That second question, what about them repel each other? That's too deep for me to get into. Like, all I know is like with wicked questions, you sort of feel it. Do you have a sense for that, Philip? What causes wicked questions to repel each other? You're on mute.
They're paradoxes. And therefore they ask you to think differently. So that's what I would say. And I think that what you just outlined could work quite well. In fact, very well. Especially with maybe people that are more action oriented. Technical people, I think that would be I think that could be.
Yeah. And Sherry's question is there a Scrum Master when there are impediments? So that's an interesting question. For that, I would say let's invite John to come back and tell us what he thought of this consultation and go from there.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Um, just to answer questions quickly, every team does have a product owner. They are self-organizing. I set them up around Scrum. So, that in a lot of ways, that's pretty good. Let's see. So my takeaways, when I was looking at this myself, I did think of discovery and action dialogue, but pairing that with TRIZ is interesting. And we did a TRIZ exercise at the beginning of the semester when they started their groups. I did a combination of TRIZ and min specs so that they would form their groups powerfully. And I think it mostly worked. Your description, Jeremy, of wicked questions really opened up a lot, and that might be, having wicked questions with appreciative interviews is also a nice combination. And maybe what I'll do is, I like the idea of, one session I'll do one set, another section I'll do the other. Yes, my experience though, people have trouble with wicked questions and having to come up with them. But the idea that, your explanation really opened up a lot for me, and I can duplicate that. Let's see what else I want to say here. When they choose groups not because they like someone's shirt or, hey, I worked with that person and they're easy to get along with, but really they choose their groups based around projects, so that they are, while they are choosing groups, it is structured in terms of what they're signing into. So there is that. Let's see what else I want to say. Integrated autonomy, I have to look at. I've never seen that before. I think my biggest problem is that as we said, not all groups are really in trouble. But I do want to. I do want everybody be engaged and participating, without going, we're fine. Why are we bothering with this crap? So, I don't know. I think that, the conversation was really interesting, and I really appreciate it. I'm very appreciative. It opened up a lot for me, and I can now think about this and work on it.
Cool. Well, that was the pattern that is wise crowds, and hopefully, Colleen, that gives you some surface area of some particular structures and how we might apply those structures to address the particularities of sticky widgets in actual life. Does anybody else have a help request or design brief that we can work through? Oh, well then, is this happening? Is this actually happening? Am I going to do it? So I've been hosting this call every week for a year, and I don't think I may have played the role of client once, so I might get into it.
Right.
Let's try. Can I self-facilitate? Probably. It's not that complicated. So my situation, the most important thing, if for anybody out there as meta commentary, if you're going to self-facilitate, is use the time. Like, make sure you set a time boundary. I know I'm really good at talking forever. And since time is already burning, my help request is actually around the context of this call and this format. So what I want to do is actually run this Wise Crowd session on a format that is a little bit more public and open, like a Twitter space or Clubhouse, basically in a live sort of podcasty situation. And my ideal there would be to actually recruit specific humans, hopefully that have I don't know, diverse expertise, and larger followings, if I'm really honest, than myself, that can play the role of consultants, and then use the same pattern we just used, the wise crowds here, to deal with help requests that are again, in an ideal world, mined from advance. So whereas this space is very much sort of emergent, whoever shows up is the right people, whatever happens is the only thing that happens, to use more front end planning to sort of curate that experience and maybe mate people up with types of consultation. Looking specifically at the Web3 environment around regenerative finance as a context. So there's a bunch of internet nerds interested about using magic internet money to fix climate change, basically. And that's a particular subgroup that I'd be interested in activating with this structure. Clarifying questions.
Jeremy, so just to be clear, you're looking for a structure so that we could have wise crowds in a more asymmetrical way, or asynchronous manner.
No, I guess I'm looking the structures part seems relatively clear for me. I guess I'm actually looking for much more like, all right, so probably more practical advice on how I could actually go about like implementing and doing this stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Jeremy, have you ever been a guest on a podcast before?
I have. Yeah.
Okay.
Why is that pertinent?
Well, I was just thinking, one of the things, Jeremy, that you mentioned is, finding somebody who's got maybe a large following, or because it sounds like part of what you need also is to link up different types of people. You need almost like a collection or a reach of different types of people that then you could match up around particular problems or projects. Is that what you were saying, or is that not?
Yeah, at some point for sure, I would need a stable of consultants, both consultants and people that are sources for help requests. I think in this instance, consultants are going to be easier to get. Like people, smart people love to talk and show off how smart they are. That people love to help, but the folks especially that have help requests that need advice, it might be a very sort of vulnerable move to invite them to share the sticky widgets and unfinished questions that they have in a very working out loud, broad daylight type of manner. Yeah.
You mentioned regenerative finance. Is that the area that you want to focus on?
Yeah, that's where I spend most of my time, is in the context that is refi. Sherry also asks, what is sticky widgets? Just help requests. So in this context, we're sort of focused very narrowly in help requests are design briefs. Like, how do we organize time and attention to get stuff done with these liberating structures? I think in that context, maybe that makes sense, but it's also, I think it's probably going to be, so I have an assumption that is a broader invitation of help requests for any type or nature might be easier to get to collect, but maybe that's not the case. So those are clarifying questions. Is there any other clarifying question? Otherwise, I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
I have a question because I don't understand the people with the followings that you're looking at to enroll in your project. Are they people that are how do you say great liberating structures facilitators?
No, it would probably be it. So when I say regenerative finance, what I mean is like people around cryptocurrencies and DAOs. So people that are trying to work in a very self-organized, self-managing, self-governing environment that are sort of pressed by the difficulty of that in real life, like the communication, coordination, and collaborative challenges that come from basically what you can think about as open source project management. So where you don't have the opportunity at all actually to use forms of coercion to make people do the stuff you want. And yet we're trying to do something together here. So how do we do that actually?
So if I understand correctly, so the consultants would be people that are quite fluent in cryptocurrency and Web3, and the help requesters would be of the same category.
They would be more familiar. Yeah, they would all sort of come from the same ecosystem. Maybe the consultants don't necessarily need to be familiar with Web3, as long as the consultants are more familiar with the different toolkits of non-coercive collaboration. But probably we would all be sort of in the same ecosystem. And Sherry's got a question here. Which climate change problems specifically are you looking to trying to solve first? That is more, I think the people that have the help requests, they often have clear projects that they're working on. So it's not that we as consultants would need to help them out with that. More so, we would be looking at like the implementation challenges. So I can give two examples, just as general examples. There's one project that I'm very familiar with, which is this nerd Joe Brewer in Barichara in Colombia. This place, Barichara, has a very distinct bioregion. It is what is called a dry tropical forest, which is both tropical, but still paradoxically very similar to a desert type environment. That many years ago, that forest was clear cut and heavy sort of industrialized agriculture was used, which as a consequence caused a river in this one village to dry up. And his project in particular is regenerating or bringing this river back to life through reforestation. And in the context of magic internet money, we have given him actually enough money to purchase the land in order to do this reforestation project. And that is actually ongoing. So he might come and say, hey, this is a challenge that we're running into as we're in the midst of this very particular project. Another particular project, just to give some more surface area on examples, is there's a bunch of nerds that are committed to building soil health. So, this is a lot of information. One of the solutions to climate change has to do with carbon capture and sequestration. It turns out one of the most accessible ways to sequester carbon and capture it is in soil, in the ground. The microbiome in healthy soil actually stores a lot of carbon. And so their project is basically creating a network of different places all over the planet that you can go to basically more or less compost food and waste and biomass and generate and sequester carbon into the ground, into soil, into healthy soil. So they might run into an implementation of the incentive structure, or how do they coordinate people and doing this work, blah, 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 that we would then consult on. That's already a lot of surface area. I'm going to fuck off and see if you guys have any advice for me.
Not yet.
No, one more question. All right,
One
last
more
question.
Thank you for the surface area. Yeah, I don't know this world. And it sounds like the people in this. You said it's a small ecosystem, or you also mentioned a stable of consultants and resources. Do you know who you want to be talking to about this? Or is there are there people out there that you're like, wow, I didn't even know that person existed? That could speak to this.
There's a lot of folks that are, it's a emergent and growing space. So these are all relatively new projects. This project in Barichara has existed for 13 years, and it's probably one of the more established. But people have been doing the work of regeneration in either the regeneration of the human spirit, our sense of community, or the biosphere for a good long while. It's just that we now have a word, regeneration, and a funding model that is regenerative finance, or refi, that we can connect to those things. Around the people that I would want sort of consultation from, I have a pretty good idea about the list of those humans. And I have a list of the places that I would imagine have the help requests, right? The particular groups that are working on projects. It's just mostly like, it takes a whole shit ton of trust and assurance to actually get those help requests to reveal themselves. That's the portion I go, how am I going to incentivize people to share with me their deepest, darkest problems that they don't have answers to in a public forum, so that we can help them with that, right? Question. Barichara, Barichara, Barichara. All right, I'm out of here.
All right. So, the first thing I'm thinking of is that, I had asked originally whether it was synchronous, or, he's looking for synchronous or asynchronous. I think if to have more discussion or more input, that it becomes asynchronous. That I was thinking of Twitter. Twitter is you just say stuff, you stick it out there, it goes out into the world, and if who's ever listening can then respond or pass it on. That's not a bad model, but if you have it structured, so I don't know, Jeremy had mentioned Clubhouse. I don't know Clubhouse, but to have something like a Reddit, a place where there can be a specific question that's being addressed. So, when we do Wise Crowds, we're going to talk for 5-10 minutes right now together without Jeremy. And that's the kind of solution we'd be looking for. And so, if it's asynchronous, then I don't have to show up at whatever time the meeting is, which would allow us to be a wider audience. It's a good thing Jeremy's not in Asia, because, we'd be doing this at 8 o'clock at night, or, something like that, right? But if it's asynchronous, it's not a problem. That it's all available. So that's something to think about.
He mentioned trust being an issue. I don't think that's a problem with the asynchronous. aspect, but when we start talking about a Clubhouse or a Twitter or another platform like that, the fact that it's sort of anonymous and so open, that, you know, that kind of is, I guess,
Yeah.
creates the polarity with the trust building.
Yeah. So then maybe there needs to be some kind of gatekeeper that says, you know, you're you know, okay, you're trusted, you're not. And so you know, there needs to be some more visibility into who's providing the thing. So Twitter by itself would not be the avenue. Reddit probably wouldn't either. But having something like you know, Meetup, for instance, you have to be accepted into a Meetup group for some groups. That's, you know, how the setting goes. But to have, you know, once you're in, you're in. So, you know, once you come to this call, you could be a complete jerk, but here you are. You know, that we don't have any vetting in this call. That's fine, but then there could be some form of vetting. So, you know, but just to have an avenue, you know, I think in terms of the logistics, I'm sorry, in terms of the format, it's, you know, ask a question here. We've got this problem. We want to generate, you know, we want regenerative refi to, you know, repopulate a river. Okay, great. Who can participate in this? Well, you know, you need to be vetted in some way, that you know something about refi, or you're not a troll, or, you know, whatever. You know, one way to do it, maybe it's that it's a referral process. So you know, Jeremy knows people that he really knows and trusts, and he gives all them access. And then those people could say, well, my friend Fred, he's a good guy, and so, you know, he would, you know, refer him in, and then, you know, like that, so that there's a trust builds the trust. Obviously, would have to get a little more involved in that, but anyway, that's my thoughts. You know, maybe it's an app, you know, that someone creates an app that gives that kind of thing. So that, but, you know, I think the my main takeaway is that it probably would be better off being asynchronous, where this is a synchronous thing. You have to actually be here between, you know, 11 and 12:30 Eastern time to interact. And so just to spread it out more would provide a wider array of input.
Mike, and then my question is, how do you build trust? Okay, in a community that is extremely diverse, extremely smart, and very tribe oriented. Okay, so this is the question. And how do you, in fact, the way I understand it is, how do you get different tribes to come and sit down and smoke the pipe?
Well, depends on what you put in it.
That's right. So if that's the question, then we have to talk about the pipe and what is going to be inside the pipe. And
Is that the incentives?
And well, I don't know. You know, this is an idea that just is now sort of blossoming, but the idea would be this, you know, how do you bring the different tribes around, sitting in a place, smoking a pipe, and what is in the pipe?
Well, I think that what would draw people in is, you know, I'm interested in, I'm not regenerative finance potentially, but I'm really interested in climate issues, and I want to participate in climate issues. So in that sense, then I would be interested. That would be the invitation. Now, whether I'm appropriate to be in that group or not, that's going to be up to the group to decide. You know, maybe there's a mechanism saying, hey, you know, Fred wants to come in, you know, how many people vote for him, or, you know, that there's some kind of vetting process to do it. But once you're vetted, then you should be good.
Well, you have these, and then I have to go, unfortunately. I have a train to catch, but it's unfortunate because I quite like Web3 and I quite like Jeremy's, you know, new orientation, bringing liberating structures into the fold of Web3. But basically the thing is how it's like, at what level do you want to start? Because vetting people that are not from the tribe is already a secondary operation. The first operation is to find out which tribes are which, and get them to sit together and smoke the pipe. And then maybe if we want to play with this metaphor, and then maybe then later then it opens up. But you remember, the consultants are very good in Web3. The issues are also about Web3, how Web3 does impact climate change or just impact solutions in time. So we're talking about many tribes. I have like 6 of them just on Telegram. Everybody is using Telegram. Okay. So how do you do this?
Yeah, well, I know you're talking about tribes, which, I understand what you're talking about. I'm not aware of, I'm not sensitive to that. So I haven't looked at people going, oh, you're in that tribe or that tribe, unless you're a Trumpian or something. But in general, the idea of bringing wise crowds to the internet like that, I think is useful. Now, Jeremy's talking about refi and climate change, but why couldn't we do this for home building projects or, taking care of animals or, any other kind of cause? I think the structure would be similar in that, we don't want trolls. We want people that we do trust to provide good input.
Sorry, guys, I have to go. I can't wait to see the end of this meetup and the solution that Jeremy is going to vet or
That's
talk
right.
about. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a nice trip. Bye. So, Amy, do you want to add anything?
Thank you. Thanks for asking. I'm just in listening to what was being discussed. These things are happening in different places. They're happening in LinkedIn groups, or they're happening on Slack channels, or as we're talking about, Twitter. But it's hard because there are discussions happening, but what I'm understanding from this is that it needs to be structured in a way that uses the WISE Group's model, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the trust issue is pretty important.
The trust issue and the troll issue is real if you're just using something like Twitter.
Right.
But it's I think it takes probably some education to help people understand what the structure is that you're wanting to get out of the conversation as well. If it's not, you're having to do asynchronously, that you'll have to spend time letting people know, like, this is the moment that we're in. We're just, asking questions at this point.
Yeah, and so then maybe it would have to be said. I would completely model it on wise crowds, and that someone puts up a problem. Here's our scenario we're working with, and so from now there's clarifying questions, or you have a spot for clarifying questions, and separate from here's my idea, and that they'd be 2 separate threads, if you will. To do that. But the wise crowds model is really good. And so that you could have these 2 threads going, clarifying questions on the project versus here's what I think about the project. That would require some kind of moderation. So, when someone puts up something, they put it in the question piece. They might be asking as a question, how come you're such a jerk, or why did you come up with such a stupid idea? Which, obviously that doesn't really fly, and so you need to be moderated. So that would, I think, that would add a dimension that probably is included that would deal with the trust issue as well.
Well, and if you're creating a group, you'd have group expectations or norms of what's expected and how people are interacting with each other. And hopefully, and if it's moderated, then you could boot someone out of the conversation if they're being disrespectful.
Right.
But where are the people who are interested in these topics already having discussions? Is it Twitter? Is it Reddit?
I bet these discussions are popping up everywhere. Jeremy will probably give us more information about that. But I would think that there's conversations on Twitter, there's conversations on Telegraph, what Philip mentioned. There's everywhere that there's social media, there's conversations, Facebook, all of those places. That there are conversations. How do you find them? I don't know. That's a whole nother thing.
I think in addition to the moderator, that would be really, really important in this, to build trust is also, it's not just one conversation. Maybe you start with something that is lower stakes. And so that trust can be built, as you're having more of these conversations, more of these, wise crowds, like these kind of meetups, it starts to build. People participate, they see the value in it, cross-pollination of ideas, everything gets polished, it's fun to collaborate.
It's pretty good. I actually, this whole idea is really good for me in terms of I'm always looking for software projects that my students can do. And this would be an interesting project in terms of building this kind of network. I don't know. We'll see. When Jeremy comes back, I'll ask him. Well, I know you're listening, Jeremy. So
I actually have a YouTube video where I pitch a protocol for the learning and development, the creation of a liberating structures learning journey. I'll spam the chat. My takeaways from this are thus. What I really, really think is interesting is in terms of like building the container of trust, the moderation, I think is good. I got that. Letting folks know who the consultants are is a good first step, because I can say, hey, these are the people that you get to ask for advice, and on the basis of their reputation, that allows the relevant or right help requests to come into the space. There is a very interesting thread around helping people to anonymize the help requests, because that might be very important to reveal more information. So to have the person asking, we're already in to create a pseudonym, basically, that enables anybody to come and say, hey, this is the problem I'm having, to anonymize the who is asking and what context they're in and the people they're talking about. Could be a powerful way of ensuring that there's enough security to get help requests that actually matter to come in. I like this question around at what level of intimacy challenge makes sense to start. And there's also two very different threads. My attention is oriented towards questions and challenges of coordination, but mostly of process. But there's also a whole opportunity space about advice around the content, right? So if you think about, if I think about, Sherry asked, would Joe Brewer come on this program? He could, absolutely. And I can ask him as well. I know that dude. Shout out to Joe. What's up? Earth regenerators in the house. Bioregional activators. There was, so a question that Joe might ask might have something to do with like the coordination and collaboration of the project, but it might also be a very specific challenge. in which he wants like to effectively crowdsource the expertise of a wide swath of humanity. Those challenges are require a different orientation that would have to start with the question and then move towards who are the right people that have the expertise to triage that question. That's a little bit trickier, but in the context of questions around process, that's a little bit, I feel like we can start with the right people, but maybe both goes. So just at any rate, thinking about like, oh, maybe a session for content, like particular, like this thing, I need advice on this thing, and questions around process, around coordination, around collaboration, communication, blah, 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 is an interesting sort of juxtaposition and back and forth to play with. So thank you guys.
It was an interesting question, Jeremy. Thanks.
For sure, for sure. Well, that is our time today. This has been the Halloween edition. Oh my good God, the October 31st, 2022 edition of the Wise Crowds Liberating Structures design call. If you guys want to send me your email address in the chat, I will do my best to send you a link to a participation badge, also known as a non-fungible token. This will be uploaded and go to the YouTubes, so feel free to drop in, chat, come hang out, and I appreciate everybody's time, attention, and energy.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
For sure,
nice,
Colleen.
Colleen. It was nice to
Nice
see
meeting you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Safe travels.
Bye, Jeremy. Thanks, man.
Take care. Happy Halloween.
Thanks.